All right. Good evening. New book today. The book of Lamentations.
Lamentations.
I am so excited to get into this book with all of you. It is just chocked full of golden nuggets laying everywhere, just ripe and ready to be picked up. It is the icing on the cake to what we just completed, the book of Revelation. There is so much within this book that we're going to go deeper than probably we've ever gone before. So excited. I hope you join me in this excitement. The book of Lamentations of Jeremiah, most likely written by his scribe Baruch. Okay. First of all, what is a lamentation? Well, it is an expression of grief. All right. And so basically the book is a eulogy for the fall of Jerusalem, or the judgment of Jerusalem. So, and it is a poem in Hebrew. Okay. So this book in particular is a book of acrostics. Okay. It has 5 chapters. Chapter 1 has 22 verses. Okay. There are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Chapter 1 has, with each verse 1 will have 3 lines. Each verse starting with the first, with verse 1 being, like, for example, the first Hebrew letter out of the alphabet being Aleph. Second verse, again, 3 lines, being the second Hebrew letter being Bet, and so forth, Gimel, and so forth, all the way down, successive in order, 22 verses, 22 Hebrew alphabets, all the way down to the 22nd verse, which is, it finishes with Tav. Okay. Likewise with chapter 2. Okay. There is also 22 verses. It repeats essentially like the first chapter. The third chapter, again, has 3 sets of 22, making a total of 66 verses there. Okay. The 4th verse, or the 4th chapter, has 2 lines each, and it has only 22 verses. Okay. When we get to the 5th chapter, there is no acrostic. The only connection to the rest of the chapters is the fact that it too has 22 verses, but there is no acrostic within it, meaning that there's not a pattern of verse 1, Aleph, verse 2, Bet, verse 3, Gimel, and so forth, on down through the alphabet. Okay. So what does that mean for us? It is the poetic order of things amidst and among disorder. Okay. The poetic order of things in the midst of disorder. It's God's way of saying that he's still in control. And so when we get to chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, we're holding in your patience, possess ye your souls. And then when you get to chapter 5, there is no acrostic. There is just an outburst, an explosion of emotion that's just put forth there. And so why study this book? Okay. Why study the book of Lamentations? Well, don't you lament about something, whether it be overtaxation, politics, government, religion, what you've seen in Jerusalem of late, the things that have happened there, Jacob's trouble, all of these things put together at times can be overwhelming, and it can cause you to want to cry out and cry out to the heavens and across the land, EYKAH. Okay. It is today's current events. This book is the historical events that are going to overlay to point to the prophetical implications, and it's an overlay to the book of Revelation, specifically the barometer being Jerusalem, the fall of the city. Okay. In the Septuagint, they have a heading there, the Lamentations of Jeremiah. It states, and this happened after Israel was taken captive and Jerusalem was devastated. Jerusalem sat down weeping, and he wailed this lament over Jerusalem and said. The first verse is how. It is put forth as EYKAH in that painful expression for what has happened. It is the actual title of the book, actually, of the book of Lamentations. So you'll find that how, or EYKAH, is mentioned in chapter 2, verse 1, and it's also mentioned in chapter 4, verse 1. Okay. It's put forth in the sense of a jackal, that you would have a desolate land, and out in the outskirts you hear this wild jackal, EYKAH, and it kind of gets your attention because of the desolation that is within and will come to Jerusalem. Okay, so that really sets the mood. Again, I am really excited about this book. There's so much truth, and we're going to get into it probably deeper than we've ever gotten into. And so, again, the poetic order amidst God, the disorder there, showing that God is still in control. Okay. So with that being said, a eulogy for the fall of Jerusalem. We're going to get here into chapter 1, and we're going to go with it. How, or EYKAH, doth the city sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become as a widow? And so, just as we have just finished the book of Revelation, chapter 18, verse 7, we know there comes a time when the inhabitants of the city that make up that one world system, that have the inhabitants of the whore there, that there comes a time that she will basically say that I am no longer a widow. I am a queen, and I will see no more sorrow. Because why? She is going to be led to believe that Christ is here. Okay. And so it was full of people, and it's going to be full of people again, from Zechariah chapter 8, verse 23. Okay. When it states that there will be 10 men of all nations will grab a hold of a skirt of him who is a Jew and say, we have heard. In other words, we heard it where? We heard it in Sunday school. It's a rumor. It's traditions of men. We have heard that God is with thee. Okay. And so when the city will again be full of people in the futurist sense, when the false Christ arrives. Okay. So he's saying, how does this city sit solitary? How did we get into this mess? And how has she become a widow? Okay. She's still a widow. Why? Because Christ has not returned, and Christ is not there. Okay. And so she that was great among the nations and princess among the provinces, how is she become tributary? So she's become tributary in the sense that she's under that forced burden of the Kenite rule, the 7 mountains, or here is wisdom that those that understand from Revelation chapter 17, that there are 7 nations, 5 have fallen, and currently she is under the one that one is. Okay. Verse 2. And so that was the first verse, Aleph. The second verse will pick up with Bet. She weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. And I can assure you as far as weeping in Jerusalem, there is a wailing wall in Jerusalem, but it's not her wall. Okay, it's actually Herod's wall. All right, and so among all her lovers, this is to say her allies, she hath none to comfort her. And why? Because Christ is not there. Okay, and so she had gotten to the point with God's blessings that she had actually taken God's blessings and started to pay and buy friends along the way. And so what ends up happening is that when God removes his blessings from the nation of Israel, the nation of Judah, the 12 tribes, then all of a sudden we see that all her friends have dealt treacherously with her, and they are become her enemies. Okay, and so basically they moved in. She has no comfort because they essentially currently reject the comforter in most part, and the fact that her allies turn on her, we see that God's blessings had been removed from her as well. And so again, with no comforter, Christ is not there, so there is not going to be any peace within that city until the true Christ returns. Verse 3, Judah is gone forth into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen, and she findeth no rest. So inasmuch as it specifically mentions Judah, understand from the Greek word iudis, which has two definitions, which means that you are either of the tribe of Judah, you're born into the tribe of Judah, or you simply are an inhabitant of the land of Judea, and therefore by default, you are called of Judah by default. However, that may not be the case, okay? And again, being that Judah specifically is mentioned, when Christ spoke to the scribes and the Pharisees in the New Testament in John chapter 8, verse 33, Christ confronted them. And what did they say out of their own mouth? They put the spotlight on themselves in as much as they had spoken to Christ and revealed themselves, in that they said, we were never in bondage to any man. Okay, in John chapter 8, 33. So it revealing that they were not of Judah. Okay, and so she dwelleth among the heathen, and she findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtook her between the straits. And so they allowed themselves to be set up in exactly like through her policies that ultimately drove her into the trap. That she was chased like an animal that was brought into a trap. Okay, and so they had allowed that to themselves. And verse 4, the ways of, or the roads of Zion, which, interesting enough, current events here in February 2026, they have just opened up the road to the temple, okay, as current events. But the ways, or the road of Zion, do mourn, okay, because none cometh to the solemn feast. All her gates are desolate. So what we see within this is that road is a highway or a prelude to the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 27, the prelude to the abomination of desolation that will come to pass. And her priest sigh, just as it's written in Joel chapter 1, verse 13. They were commanded to sigh because there was the locust army that came upon them and had barked up her fig tree and stripped all of the truth within that country, and they were commanded to mourn. And her virgins are afflicted, again from Matthew chapter 25, we know that 5 of those virgins will be afflicted inasmuch as they did not have that oil, okay? And she is in bitterness. She's just ripe enough for that wormwood that falls, that star that falls from Revelation chapter 8, verse 11. She's ripe enough for that wormwood, that bitterness. But also think about from the fact that you have Judah as well as the other 10 tribes that had come out of captivity. When they were going through the desert, they came to the waters of Mara, and they found that the waters were actually bitter. Okay, and so within that spiritually, we see that from the book of James, chapter 3, verse 11, that James would point out that do we get water, sweet water, and find that there's actually bitter water there as well? And obviously, no, we don't. So we have to go and understand the true water, which is Christ, the living water there. Okay. And so verse 5, her adversaries are the chief. That's to say they are the head. Her enemies prosper, for the Lord hath afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children are gone into captivity before the enemy. And so a captivity, in large part, a captivity of lies that is spread about from the enemy's mouth. Okay. Speaking of her children, just to name some of the children, speaking of including Israel, you have Jezreel, which means God will either sow or God will either scatter. You have Ruhamah or Lo Ruhamah, which means either God has pitied or God does not pity. And then you have Ami, my people, Lo Ami, not my people. Okay. So included within those that went into captivity, we just read also of Judah there. Okay. And so wherever they are afflicted by the enemy. And so verse 6, and from the daughter of Zion, her beauty is departed. Okay. And so when you see this phrase, the daughter of Zion, what we're talking about specifically is the collective of the people within the land of Judea. And that when you have God's blessings, they were confident, they were strong, they were able to repel the enemy. For example, from 2 Kings chapter 19, when Sennacherib came down with Rabshakeh, his captain of the guard, and Rabshakeh was espousing all of these, my God, we've destroyed these gods, and how is your God any different? And we're going to do all these things. And so from 2 Kings chapter 19, this is when Isaiah came in and basically encouraged Hezekiah, the daughter of Zion, meaning the collective people, that they would be able to have the strength to repel the enemy there. But what we're talking about here in this sense is that there does come a time, spiritually speaking, from Micah chapter 3 Micah chapter 4 verse 6 there, that there comes a time that concerning the daughter of Zion, that she's told to be in pain and to be in labor and to travail as a woman. Okay. And so that she would ultimately be in that travail, just like when we read about in the New Testament, the birth of and the tribulation that would come upon her. Okay. That she would ultimately be driven and brought into Babylon. Concerning these daughters, Christ would also, when he carried his cross, he would mention the daughters of Jerusalem. He would say, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and your children. But then ultimately, through all the tribulation that was brought upon them, that if he would state that blessed are those that are barren. All right. And so the daughter of Zion is departed, meaning that Judah, the children, the people, they're just simply not there in large part. Okay. Her princes are become like harts. They find no pasture, and they are gone without strength before the pursuer. The same pursuer that we read about in chapter 3 there. And there does come a time, prophetically speaking, that we will see that the strength of most will turn to mush, just like we read from Revelation chapter 19, when we see that locust and scorpion army that turns people's backbones to mush when the supernatural does arrive. Okay. And that's what this book is about. The historical events, as well as dovetailing what's happening in the city to the prophetical implications here. All right. And so verse 7, Jerusalem remembered in the days of her affliction and her miseries and all her pleasant things that she had in the days of old. So this is the things that she used to enjoy. And when her people fell into the hand of the enemy, none did help her. So if anything, not that they don't help, if anything, they actually finance and support it. Okay. And they look the other way because why? They are in captivity in large part, not only physically with the systems of this world, but mainly and most importantly, the captivity of lies that she has placed on her. And there she is not able to repel the enemy that is there as well. Okay. The adversaries saw her and did mock her Sabbaths. And so that's exactly what happens in large part in the city, Jerusalem, in current events. Christians are mocked. Unfortunately, there are reports that Christians are spit upon. Okay. And so we see that when you don't have the comforter there, then that's certainly going to be the case. Verse 8, Jerusalem hath grievously sinned. Can you say that? Can you say that Jerusalem has sinned? Yeah, that's not politically correct. Well, Jerusalem has sinned, okay? And so, therefore, she is removed, okay? She's removed in the sense that she's looked upon as being unclean in regards to God, okay? She's looked upon as being filthy. And when that filth rises to the surface and boils over, the most filthy that she will be is when you see the abomination of desolation that's going to stand in the temple and claim to be God. And so that will be the most filthy that she will be when he does arrive soon there. And all that honored her despised her, because they have seen her nakedness. Yea, she sigheth and turneth back to backward. So turning back ultimately back to where she had originally stemmed from, that being the city of Jebus, when Jebus had that bloody birth. And it's because of who occupies the city. Okay. And so verse 9, her filthiness is in her skirts. She remembereth not her last end. Therefore, she came down wonderfully. And so, prophetically speaking, she does not consider her latter end or the last times or the end times, when that ultimately from Matthew chapter 24, verse 2, that she will not consider the fact that she will come down again when there will be no stone upon another. All right. And so Therefore, or she hath no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy hath magnified himself. And this word magnified is by twisting or intertwining themselves. In other words, twisting the truth, intertwining themselves. You might also think about the tares and the wheat put together there. All right. And so they are there among them with their by magnifying themselves above God's people. Verse 10, the adversary hath spread out his hand upon all her pleasant things, for she hath seen that the heathen entered into her sanctuary, whom thou didst command that they should not enter into thy congregation. So again, Christ would point this out in Matthew chapter 23 when he said that the scribes and the Pharisees are actually sitting in the seat of Moses where they should not be, and that they would ultimately, through their lineage, would be ultimately responsible from the death all the way back to Abel, all the way to Zacharias, who they slew between the porch and the altar there. Okay. And so they are there, they are occupying, and they are claiming in large part to be of our brother Judah, but are not and do lie. Okay. Verse 11, all her people sigh. Why? Because spiritual meat is scarce. From the famine of the end times, Amos chapter 8, verse 11, for the famine is not for bread, but it's for hearing God's word. They seek bread. Many seek Christ, and they have given their pleasant things for meat to relieve the soul, not the flesh. O Lord, and consider I am become vile. And so, just like what Paul would teach concerning meat, not specifically within this group, but there are many that have been in church long enough that they should have actually be the point to where they should be the teachers, but yet they should be taught again, and they are only baby enough to take milk. Okay. And so the underlying thought here is the fact that although they do seek bread, and although they do try to seek the meat, the system itself, the adversary, basically through the captivity, keeps them in bondage to that system. And so the city says, I'm vile because of this. I'm filthy because of this. I have these inhabitants that I'm viewed at as unclean. And that's exactly right. When you look at current events today, when you look at the barometer of the end times, look what's happening in the world today. Okay. Verse 11 or 12. And so verse 12 is the verse where we get to the point to where the city speaks forward here. Okay. So you have to pick up on that. It's her rebuttal. The next set of 11 verses being the city that is speaking because of what is being done there. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? Behold, and see if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord hath afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. And so we see who allows it, who is actually responsible. It's the Lord has actually allowed this to come to pass. And so she has it coming, and God actually afflicted her because of the backsliding of Judah, the backsliding of Israel. And ultimately we saw that Nebuchadnezzar would come into the city there. Verse 13, from above he hath sent fire into my bones. This is speaking of the city, and it prevailed against them. And so from 2 Kings chapter 25, you can read the report there that Nebuchadnezzar actually came in and burnt the city and burnt the temple there. It also happened again in 70 AD. And so in connection with this, what it is exactly doing is the fact that because of this, it's got her down. Okay. And I felt that Psalms 102 verse 3 really captured the thought. And Psalms 102 verse 3 states, "For my days are consumed like smoke, and my bones are burned as an hearth." Okay. He hath spread a net for my feet. He hath turned me back, and he hath made me desolate and faint all the day. Again, desolate, receptive of the desolator, faint because of that spiritual famine that comes to pass. Amos chapter 8, verse 11. 14, the yoke, and in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 48, this is a yoke of iron. The yoke of my transgressions is bound in his hand. They are wreathed, they are intertwined. And I want you to think about that yoke of iron that is intertwined and will be intertwined when you see the iron and the clay that tries to mix. When we get to the prophetical sense, just like we discovered from the book of Revelation, just completed there. And they are wreathed and come upon my neck. They have made my strength to fall. And the Lord hath delivered me into their hands. That's to say, the Kenites, from whom I am not able to rise up. Verse 15, the Lord hath trodden underfoot. So when you hear that term, also think about the trodden of underfoot spoken of in Revelation chapter 11, verse 2, how it is will be of the time of the Gentiles, speaking of specifically within our generation. And all my mighty men in the midst of me, he hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Judah, as in a winepress. And this assembly is essentially the one world system that comes to be, okay, the new world order. But even more specific from the Hebrew, it is from meaning a fixed time that this will come to pass. It is a festival. Again, I want you to think about Revelation chapter 11, when there is a festival going on, when they are married, they're giving each other in gifts. Why? Because of what they just had seen and witnessed, being that the two witnesses had just died in the streets prior 3.5 days before they will rise. Okay. But this is a fixed time. The assembly also spoken about in Psalm 75, verse 2. Okay. And so verse 16, for these things I weep, mine eye. Okay. And that's to get your attention in for the English reader, that he wants to specifically point out something here that you can get in tune with what he's saying here. Mine eye runneth down with water, because the comforter that should relieve my soul is far from me. Okay. And so for the English reader, it says mine eye, but this is the 16th verse. Well, it just so happens, coincidentally, that the 16th letter of the Hebrew is actually the letter An. An, the symbol, is actually the symbol of an eye. Okay. And so what God is doing is that I want you to open your spiritual eye to be able to see what I see, to be able to connect the spiritual vision to the current events and prophecy, and that you would have eyes to see and ears to hear to understand what we're talking about here, what we're reading, that you would see it as God sees it. Okay. And so the Comforter, being that the Comforter should relieve my soul, is, and that that the Comforter is far from me, meaning that Christ is not there, okay, and will not be there until the second advent, okay, and my children are desolate, and because the enemy prevailed. So in conclusion with that, I want you to see that God is still in control for us today. For Christians, we can have the Comforter. We have him to open our eye, the ayin in verse 16, that we will be able to see eye to eye with God, understand what he's saying, have the eyes to see the historical events, understand that this is, again, a fall of the city, and that God is with us, even amidst all of Jacob's trouble, in the midst of all the EYKAH of the world that is almost overwhelming. But you have to understand, again, that's why God is putting forth this acrostic, and so that he would let us know that, hey, I got everything under control. And so we have that Comforter, and we can have that eye to see these things that we have talked about. That is just the introductory to this book, the first 16 verses, the acrostic, starting with Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and so forth, all the way down through Tav. We're just getting into this book. It's super exciting. It's chock full with spiritual truths. I hope that you enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy studying this with you. And again, there's so much within this that's going to just be the icing on the cake for the book of Revelation here. So with that, we're going to stop and maybe take some questions, comments, and go from there. And we'll look forward to seeing you for the next study.
Preston, I'm glad you chose this book.
I'm blown away. I've never studied this book, Preston. This is wonderful.
That's good. Yeah, I can see the passion in this study, Preston. Lots of.
I'm like I'm so pumped about this book. I mean, it's just, there's so much here. And again, just dovetailing all the things that we studied from the previous book, Revelation, we're just going to weave it in. And I'm just so excited about it.
That shows.
I hope that when we get done with this book, this is going to be your new favorite book for a long time.
I'm like Diana. I haven't studied this too much either. So I was like, you're blowing my socks off.
Yeah, that was very, very interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's timely, Preston. It really is.
It is.
It's 100% timely for what's going on in Jerusalem, what has happened. Again, to place your eye and watch the barometer, watch Jerusalem, and see what's happening over there. Okay. And call it as the scriptures calls it. Jerusalem is a sinner, So we shouldn't have to apologize to anybody or any religion or any politics for stating what God's word says. Call it like it is, and read it scripture by scripture as we're doing, and understand that Judah has gone into captivity. Well, where is she? Okay, So, but again, we just got started in this book. There's so much more. And I hope that you are going to enjoy this with us. So I'm going to stop the recording unless somebody's got anything else. Okay.